What you are seeing harvested this summer that really hasn't even hit the grocery shelf yet is a 25% increase in the cost of product to the processor, the canners, the buyers downstream. California's State Board of Food and Agricultural president says that onions and garlics have already been negotiated for 2023 with another 25% increase in price from the prices that we have now. Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to read this to you word for word because it's that important. If you have family, if you have friends, anyone that you care about, please share this with them because everything that is said here by Mr. Snyder is true. And what people don't understand is it's what I've been trying to warn you about for several months now. And that is that inflation is here to stay. The price of goods, especially those things that we need in order to live, is going to continue to go up, and not at a very slow pace. What we're looking at for next year compared to this year, in my opinion, is nothing. We've gone through nothing compared to what's coming in the years ahead. And next year, I believe, is when a lot of people are going to start to really wake up, because everyone is pretty much stretched right now, but they're still able to eat. They're still able to substitute steak for hamburger, steak for chicken, those brand cereals for the store brand cereals, the brand milk for the store brand milk, which is usually the same milk. Trust me, I used to work in the dairy industry. However, let me read this for you. The era of cheap food and cheap gasoline is over. And the problem with that, ladies and gentlemen, is this, is that fuel is food. Fuel is fertilizer, i.e. natural gas. And with those two things going up in price and continually going up in price, it's going to make the price of everything, especially food and the things that you need to live, more expensive going forward. If you can honestly ask yourself, with everything that's going on with the money printing, even with quantitative tightening that the Federal Reserve is doing right now, even with that, we're still facing inflation. The only problem is that we're having inflation, and at the same time, people are going to start losing their jobs because of the quantitative tightening. And that is what's called stagflation, which is worse than inflation or deflation. Stagflation is when you have high inflation in the price of goods and you have low economic activity or a lot of unemployment, if you want to say it that way as well. Mr. Snyder starts off by saying, all of our lives are about to change in a major way, but the vast majority of the population still does not understand what is coming. Share this video. I don't ask this very often. Throughout our entire lives, we have been able to depend on a couple of things. There will always be cheap gasoline to fuel our vehicles, and there will always be mountains of cheap food at the grocery store. No matter who was in the White House and no matter what else was going on in the world, those two things always remained the same. Unfortunately, those days are now over and they are not coming back. And I don't agree that they're not coming back. One day they will. I believe that in our lifetimes, we're going to have a very big depopulation event on Earth. And therefore, we will actually have abundance again. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's not, because I believe that we have everything that we need now in order to feed everyone in the world and for all of us to prosper. It just seems that a small group of people, if you want to call them that, have a different opinion on that. They want a different outcome than what I just stated. We have entered the greatest energy crisis that any of us have ever experienced, and it isn't going to go away anytime soon. And he says, so you might as well get used to high gas prices. Earlier this month, all new record highs were set in South California. And in Los Angeles and Long Beach, they reached a record high of $6.46. In Orange County, $6.42. In Ventura, it doesn't say record high, but goodness, if that's not a record high at $6.40, then I wonder what was. Riverside County, $6.33. San Bernardino County, $6.32. But that is not the real problem. The real problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that fuel that we all need in order to convert into fertilizer. Why? Because fertilizer is food. And he says that thanks to the war in Ukraine, the price of natural gas has been pushed up to the stratosphere. And needless to say, this is going to greatly affect food production in the months ahead. According to Bloomberg, over 2/3 of all fertilizer production capacity in Europe has already been shut down due to soaring natural gas costs. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about 2/3. 2/3. That is an astronomical number. I know that Canada, well, I think I know, if I remember right, Canada is the biggest producer, I believe, of potash in the world. But how are they going to be able to supply 2/3 of Europe's needs so that they can continue to grow the same amount that they've grown before? I don't think that they will. I hope that I'm wrong. And here's the quote from Bloomberg. Europe's fertilizer crunch is deepening with more than 2/3 of production capacity halted by soaring gas costs, threatening farmers and consumers far beyond the region's borders, meaning worldwide. And at the same time, Russia is burning off $10+ million of natural gas every single day. This is an absolutely massive story, but hardly anyone in the United States is covering it. That's because a lot of people in the United States live in a normalcy bias that they will no longer have the luxury of living in next year and the years to come. Trust me, a lot of people will wake up next year. There will be a lot of hunger. This Thanksgiving, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy it the best that you can. It is a heck of a shame that I'm going to have to call Miss Ann at the food bank and tell her that I cannot allocate any turkeys for this year's food drive. Maybe we'll do chickens. I don't know. But anyways, I digress. And they say that nitrogen plant shutdowns in Europe are not simply a problem in Europe, she said. Reduced supply on the scale seen this week not only raises the marginal cost of production of nitrogen fertilizers, but will also tighten the global market, putting pressure on plant nutrients availability in Europe and beyond. Remember that what happens overseas can affect us here as well, no matter what country you live in. She says, we are already seeing prices elsewhere rise again. The price of common nitrogen fertilizer, urea, in New Orleans rose over 20% in weekly prices on Friday, the most since March, a few weeks after the war began, according to Green Markets. Then Mr. Snyder continues to say, I know that fertilizer may not be the most exciting topic for a lot of people, but the truth is that approximately half of the global population would starve if we did not have any. And that is the truth. I mean, that is the truth. If you plant without fertilizer, you're going to get probably 50, maybe 40% yield compared to what you planted with fertilizer. In fact, it's estimated that nitrogen fertilizer now supports approximately half of the global food production. In other words, Fritz Haber and Carl Bosch, the pioneers of this technological breakthrough, are estimated to have enabled the lives of several billion people who otherwise would have died prematurely or have never been born at all. Without fuel, ladies and gentlemen, we have no calories. That's just the world that we live in. So prepare. Are you getting it yet? Are you waking up to the fact that you need to prepare if you're not preparing? Are you waking up to the fact that if the underneath of your bed is empty, that maybe you ought to stick something under there that'll last a long time that you can consume and get nutritional value out of? And by the way, if you're looking for real nutritional value in food, check out Nutrient Survival. Hey, that was a good plug, wasn't it? Because Nutrient Survival, ladies and gentlemen, is the most nutritious freeze-dried food that there is in the market. And yes, it is a little bit pricey, but guess what? You get exactly what you pay for. Now, let's go back to the video, and no, this video is not sponsored. Okay, so Mr. Snyder continues to say the only way that we can even come close to feeding everyone on the planet is by using vast quantities of fertilizer. But now fertilizer plants all over Europe are being forced to shut down because of the price of natural gas. As long as this global energy crisis persists, the global food crisis will also persist. It makes you wonder why China has been stocking up on all of the grain that they've been stocking up on for like the last year or so. Remember, China's got about, I think Financial Prepper put this out on one of his previous videos. I put it out before, but he just put one out here a few days ago, yesterday I think. So go check it out. He said, him and his wife said that I believe China had like 60% of the wheat, 60% or 50% of the rice, and like 63% of the corn or something like that. But that's an awful lot of the world's supply. All right. So let that sink in there for a little bit. He says Russia is normally the largest exporter of natural gas in the entire world, and an end to the war in Ukraine would go a long way towards solving our current problems. But there isn't going to be an end to the war in Ukraine. Once again, Western leaders are assuring us that the war will not end until Russia is forced out of every inch of Ukrainian territory. The Western leaders need to keep printing money. And a war is a great excuse to print money, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, we live in a debt-based system, which means that printing press has to go on and on and on. As soon as it stops, things will start to collapse, just like you're seeing now, how the economy and the markets are starting to collapse because they're doing quantitative tightening. But don't worry about that. Soon enough, they'll start doing quantitative easing again, and we're going to have what I like to call a crack-up boom, where everything's going to go up, including the price of your food and everything you need to live. And I'm going to skip to the bottom over here. Of course, like always, I'll leave the link to this article on a pinned comment so you can revisit it. Here he finishes up by saying, this is really happening. Food prices may seem high to you right now, but the truth is that this is the lowest they are going to get. The cost of living is becoming extremely oppressive, and countless people out there are really struggling to make it from month to month. Earlier today, I came across a tweet from a 47-year-old lawyer that really hammered this point home. And wait till you listen to this. This lawyer says, 20 years ago, as a server, so as a waiter, I lived in a corner one-bedroom apartment downtown with amazing water views for $700 a month. A similar apartment now is $3,600 a month, more than 5 times as much. As a lawyer at age 47, I am unable to afford living in the same apartment that I did at age 27 while I was waiting tables. Sadly, what we have been through so far is just the beginning. The cost of gasoline is going to continue to go up. The cost of natural gas, and in my opinion, all fuels will continue to go up. The cost of food will continue to go up. And he says, in fact, the cost of just everything will continue to go up. The artificially inflated lifestyles that we are able to enjoy, that we have been able to enjoy for decades, are now disappearing, and there is a tremendous amount of pain on the horizon. And what he means by artificially inflated, I've covered this in the past, and it's that every time that the Federal Reserve / the government, because they're one and the same in my opinion, every time that they print money out of thin air, what we're doing is we are borrowing resources from the future. So let's say, for example, that you print money out of thin air, right? You go and borrow a mortgage for a house. That's money that you haven't earned. That's money that was never earned into existence. So you're borrowing that money, creating that money out of nothing now, promising that you will pay it back with future labor. So we are taking resources from the future, spending them in the now, and then, ladies and gentlemen, what are we going to have later on? We're going to have a liquidity issue because there's so much debt, and there's so much debt in the world that we can never, ever pay it back. Never. The way that the system was made is so that whatever is borrowed by governments can never, ever, ever be paid back. And that your wealth, that your time, and that your labor is stolen from you through the guise of inflation. Remember how Jerome Powell is always saying, we're going to try and get back to 2% inflation. And people are like, oh yeah, that's great. Bring us back down to 2% inflation. Why is that? Is it because you rather get stolen from at a rate of 2% a year instead of 8 or 9%? Because it's still theft. Inflation at 2% is just as much theft as inflation at 10 or 20%. It's still the same thing, theft. The thing is that they've lost control over the inflation that they've been creating over the years because they've gotten greedy and they want more power, and in order to do that, they need to print more money. A government thrives because it has a fiat currency, and it can use that fiat currency, i.e. the dollar, to manipulate what it wants to manipulate. Why do you think all of these other countries feel like they're bullied around? Why? Because the U.S. uses the dollar and uses the military, that it uses dollars to pay the military with, to bully countries around the world. And they're getting tired of it, but they're not going to be our destruction. It's not going to be other countries around the world that destroy the United States. The United States will do exactly like Abraham Lincoln said, and he said this: Paraphrasing it, the United States will not fall from an outside invasion, meaning that we will not fall here in the United States because of invading forces. It will fall because it falls from within, meaning that we ourselves will be the cause of the fall of this empire that we've created. And when I say we, I mean the government. I don't mean you and me, because I'm sure that we didn't vote for this. We have been taxed and not represented for decades, ladies and gentlemen. And that's just the way it is. And you are going to pay for it. I am going to pay for it. Every person that works for a wage or a salary will pay for it. So prepare.